I've got right, here we go. Right. Oh, we're on screen now, and it's 7:13. That's correct. Here we go. And right, okay. I'm just gonna check something in the background. Do. Oh my God, yes. Oh right. Right. Okay. Now I'll have to. I got to let the newspaper know that I've made a mistake with a column. Right. Okay. But other than that, it's fine. So right. Right. Let's start off with any news from two of you, and then I will talk. Right. So Margaret, any news from you, darling?
Well, I've been delving into our library,
Not the library. The library.
our
No.
library that's in my garage. And I've got a lot of these antiquity books. Can you
Oh
see
yes.
that? Antiquity.
Oh, you've got them.
I've got loads of them.
It's a very extensive library, you know.
It certainly is. And
Hang on a
I'm
minute. Can I
reading
just stop you a minute? Is this the library, right? Is this the library? That
a
this is
library.
one of Claire's new chat-up lines. Would you like to come and see my library instead of would you like to come and see my socketed
Well,
accent?
that's my chat up line at the moment, whilst it's still here.
Has it worked?
No, clearly not, because they're still here and you've not been. But
Yeah,
anyway,
hang on a minute. Hang on a
You
minute.
need a
Right?
more alluring voice.
When we do collect the library, right? And you haven't got the books there, and you invite a young man into your library, that is known as
Man in library.
mis-selling your wares.
anyway,
Hang on, Margaret, go on. Talk. We both right. Go.
I've been reading a little bit. It's called The Invasion Hypotheses in Irish Prehistory.
Go on, give it to us.
Well, it's talking a little bit about, and I've learned something here. It's saying that the building of tumuli, such as Newgrange and Noath, may have taken considerably less than the hundreds of thousands of man days originally thought, because they reckon small farming communities used oxen and slide cars. What the heck are slide cars?
I think we're talking about sledges.
Okay, to aid them in their work. And I didn't know that oxen were castrated male cattle. So I've learned something there. Anyway, they use it. They've got proof of this from Germany, Denmark, and Poland.
Okay.
And it says that the great hengers of the British late Neolithic may owe as much to the tractive power of bewildered bullocks as to the organisational capabilities of a chiefdom society.
Can you say that quick?
I'm not saying it again.
Okay.
Bewildered bullocks.
Yeah. Okay. I think you let off that one. Yeah.
Stonehenge without them.
Right, okay. Fair enough. Yeah. I had a message earlier on off Janice, which I don't think I really read. It says, "Hi, Carl. Sorry to take so long to reply. I'm going to have to give your classes a miss. I'm sorry, but the other things I do on Tuesday are finishing too late. I really enjoyed the classes, except for Margaret. I have taken part in, thanks to Janice. So, no, I was being really cruel to you, Margaret. So, I really enjoyed the classes I have taken part in. Thanks, Janice. So, yeah, I think there was always a problem with us starting late and stuff, and yeah, so it's a bit of a shame, really.
Yeah.
Never mind.
It is.
She could always do the Wednesday one. Or you don't do that anymore.
Yeah. I mean, she told me she'd enjoyed it a lot, but she said it's like I find the same thing. I find very often 2 things or 3 things I want to go on at the same sort of time, and it's difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. No. We still do the Wednesdays, Andy. But I just think it's Janice. It's like a friends thing, isn't it? You've got somebody there, and like it makes things easier. So yeah. So right, okay. Have we got Judith here tonight?
Yeah.
She was there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
Oh right, yeah. I was going to say I do believe that everyone bar one has paid their monies tonight, and that bar one is going to do so soon. So that's good. Thank you for getting all that money in the bank. I wanted to mention something, right? I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I need to find urgent evidence of what this thing is in West Wales. And I need to get a team of people up here urgently to do some excavation work. So we're planning some excavation work on the weekend, on the first weekend of June. So if anyone wants to excavate what we're excavating, then they'll be very welcome to come down to West Wales. We'll be sending that out into as a letter to everybody, and more details in the post this week. But if anyone's interested, we could desperately do with any help.
Okay.
So now you know, and I can't say any more than that. Powers that be. Well, I got the powers that be breathing down my neck, so I've got to work out what this is quite quick. Right. So yes, anyone interested? First weekend of May, Saturday and Sunday. We need people.
June. May or June. June, you said.
Sugar.
June.
Chicken droppings. June. Yes, it's June. It's going to be June. You are dead right. Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's the second. Yeah, it's like a month away. So yeah, you are very right. Because I've lost my months, haven't I? Yeah. So it's the second weekend of June.
Okay.
Second weekend.
Oh no! Right. So
I'm a little bit confused now.
I thought
Do you mean the first weekend of June?
I've written down
start again. Everything that I've just said is wrong. I mean the first weekend of June, right? It's the first weekend.
First weekend of June, right?
Yeah,
that's what I wrote down.
Sunday of June. Yeah, that's right. Because I thought next month. Yeah, I thought next month was April, right? Yeah, 20. Oh no! Right,
it was all going so well.
So a month's time, we need anyone who wants to help in West Wales to give up some time and help us. So there we go.
Do we have to bring our own trowels, or do you provide stuff?
We will provide leotards, trowels, hard hats, and there will be a statue of Lloyd George looking at you.
Of course.
Yeah.
Oh well.
That's it.
Right. So yeah, let's crack on with some sense. I'm just going to order my coffee. Don't forget the coffee. There you go. Right. Anne, anything from you?
Well, yes, I was watching a program on YouTube today about Flag Fen being in trouble. It's evidently drying out. And what his name was?
Francis Pryor.
Francis Pryor. He was there. And he said, we really need to do something to protect it. On the other hand, he said it's deteriorating quickly. He's not sure it can all be saved. And they think that perhaps what they need to do is have it all recorded, because they have everything written down so that at least we know about it. But they're going to try and put something in place to preserve it. But he's concerned that it might not be to get altogether savable as it is.
I think the problem is, which is quite evident, is that we just do not prioritize anything other than building houses in this country. There's no other thing that we do in this country other than building houses. Nothing else is important. And if you go to any other country, Flag Fen would have had a dome built over it, and it would have water systems and everything in there. You could see the walkways. It would be preserved for many years, but unfortunately we don't have that type of infrastructure, or we don't have that type of campaigning to do these things in this country. And it's quite, it's not, Francis Pryor's got a good point, and the relevance of this is to understand that there are changes, and to record those changes, and to understand that the landscape dries out. And without recording these, you don't have that information. If we forget the past, you're doomed to repeat those mistakes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Anyway.
The wooden part, the wooden structures, the very ancient trackway.
Yeah,
that's all in a building. That bit should be okay. Is he just talking?
No, it's not. It's not,
yeah,
because that's going to be under threat as well, because it is all to do with the water system and stuff, and the spraying. And
the bog is drying. The land that it's on is drying, and yes, causing a concern.
Oh dear.
Yeah, exactly. So so anything else from you, Anne?
No, that's what's in today.
Okay. What about you, Roger?
No, nothing at the moment.
Okay. Andy?
I saw something on the news about Cardiff and doing some, I don't know whether they're extending the airport or working near the airport where they were.
Yes, we did this on Wednesday last week. Can I tell you a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Actually, do you know what we should do? Right. We're going to forget anyone else has got anything else to say at this minute, because we'll go back to that, because this is so relevant, because this is in my head. I can do this in my head. We're just looking at the images. So let's just it's best to strike with it's a bit like my acting, to be honest with you. One of the most frustrating things that you've got with me on set is I usually put all my energy into something, and then they say, "Oh, right, that was just a rehearsal, and I can never do it again." Right. So it's true. You know, one of my best scenes for something. It was just like it was like, oh my God, that was so brilliant, Carl. And the director's going, "That's amazing. Now we're going to film it."
Oh,
I could never get it.
I
wasn't able to do it again.
That's immature directors always film the rehearsals because they're often better.
Always.
Yeah.
Right now, actually, it says Bones, the woman at the airport, but in fact, there we go. These are women's bones at the airport, right? This is it. So mystery. There we go. Right. Okay. So I don't need the text, right? But what we've got two sets of children's skeletal remains, and these look like they date from the 500-600s. And what is fascinating about this collection of human remains, and if I can get you some more, it would be best if I type the right human airport bones archaeology, and hopefully we can get all the images. Right, that's it. It's coming up nicely there. Oh right, yeah. This is it. These are the images. That one's a good one. So basically, there's a bit of a backstory with this, which I'm going to tell you. Let's just see if we can get some more images. Airport. Hang on. Yeah. Airport. Cardiff. We typed in Cardiff. That'll be better. Cardiff. Right, Cardiff. Right, here we go. There's a few images. Right, okay. Which one? That's the baby. And there we go. It's not giving it to me. Oh, there. Come on, do it. Let me have this image. Right, yeah. So, right, okay. Let me start again. So, what they've been excavating this locality for some time. The stuff that's coming out now was excavated last year. They're going to have another excavation there this year, right? So, what we've got, Andy Seaman of Cardiff University, which is still one of the only archaeological universities now left in the whole of Wales. All the others have more or less closed. We used to have a few archaeological universities in Wales, but Swansea's gone, Newport's gone. They're closing like whatever, but we've still got one in Cardiff, and the archaeologist Andy Seaman's excavating. And what this is, you've got basically Lias limestone. So the graves have been cut directly into the rock. There are 39 sets of human remains that they found, and they found 2 children's remains, right? And what they've got is, and all of them, other than one, are actually female, right? So this is really, really interesting. So if this was an Iron Age burial set of remains, it would tie in with everything that we've been saying about the Iron Age. But these don't date from the Iron Age; they date from the 500-600s. Now that is absolutely fascinating. And the reason why it's fascinating is my history teacher, when I used to ask my history teacher what happened in the late 400s all the way to 1066 in Wales, where's the evidence? And he said nobody lived here. Because at that stage, when I was in school, 40 years ago, we didn't have any evidence of anybody living in Wales. Really, we had no burial grounds. We had nothing really. Right, but in those 40 years, we found a lot of burial grounds, and we found a lot of evidence. And like these set of human remains, which actually which date from a wonderful period in time that we don't know a lot about now. This is a piece of glass. Now, this glass itself actually comes from the Levant, or basically central, well, the eastern end of the Mediterranean, right, which is Israel and that type of area. So basically, that's the Levant. Anyway, the point is we've actually found glass here. And the reason that's a piece of glass, and the reason why this is so amazing, and the reason why this is such amazing archaeology, is it now fills in massive gaps in a period that we don't know a lot about. And this has all been on the news, and there's been a lot about it on the news. And it's one of the things that they've been obsessing with is that we've got most of the bodies are actually women, right? In fact, 39 and one's a man, and you've got 2 babies. So one of the things that they've been obsessing with, and I've been thinking, the women are buried over there in the 500-600s, and the men are buried over there. But there could be an easy answer to this. This site isn't far away from the foundation Christian monastery or monastic landscape, which would have been a residual Romanized landscape for a place called Lansford Major, where we've got the school of Llaniltyd, which is Saint Iltyd, which is something that not really sure about the saint in my book, but we've got lots of carved stones there, and we've got the really early origins of a late Roman Christian community, which isn't far away from this site. And there's one thing that that you won't get. The reason why you come along to my classes is one thing you don't get on the normal reports is it's quite obvious why they're all women. And I'll give you a few clues, right? So if you go to the article, right, so we'll get the article up online, right, and we'll just grab a few headlines, right? So there it is, excavated last year. These are the headlines here. This little bit these are the headlines here. These 2 paragraphs underneath that. It says, now researchers have learned nearly all of those buried in the cemetery are women. You know that, I told you. While their bones show signs of wear and tear, indicating they carried out heavy manual work, there are also surprising signs of wealth and luxury. There's a clue in what they've just said, but they haven't actually put this in any of the articles. And they talk about one woman's been tossed in a ditch. Okay, fair enough. However, that gives all the information I need to say it's probably a religious community. It's probably an early Christian female religious community. What would nuns have done? They would have done heavy manual work. What would nuns have been used to? Being looked after, right? So you would have signs of wealth and luxury. What would these nuns have been doing, or early priests? Because at that stage, Christianity was still open to women being priests, right? So so when we look at this evidence, for me, this is indicative of an early female Christian community in South Wales, and why not, right? And if that's the case, that is really, really significant, right? And when you do read articles like this, you've got to look at the small print. They're not giving you everything. But having a load of women together doesn't mean to say that there's a segregated cemetery, that the women are unclean, right? We're looking at the other way. The women are not unclean. They're doing a heavy manual work, and there are signs of wealth and luxury. And who other than in society would have been like this? It would have been nuns or female priests working at that stage in early Christianity, and that's what it says to me. And what we've got is lots of images like this: broken bones, 39 adult skeletons, and you've got this sort of dug into this bedrock. A full analysis is still ongoing. Andy Seaman from the university. Do you know, I fear for something that was mentioned at the beginning. Cardiff University has got a lot of human remains that have excavated around the area, and lots of those human remains haven't yet been buried, and they're still being analysed. If Cardiff University cut their funding for the archaeological department, we're in serious trouble archaeologically wise in Wales, because the main museum is closed to archaeology. It's closed its doors because the paintings and stuff are getting damp, and we're talking about Van Goghs and we're talking about Gauguin paintings. This is the National Museum of Wales, which they don't have funding for. So the broader aspect of this is that we are doing its excavation, but then I'm sitting back and thinking, do we really need to do this level of excavation if we can't protect the bodies? Anyway, one point, my idea of archaeology is that when you find a set of human remains, you photograph it, you record it, you leave it in the ground with the rings and stuff that the body's buried with, and you backfill. But these bodies have all been lifted. That's my only criticism. Anyway, this last point here, I'm glad Andy raised this. It could be that it's something particular about this community, or it could be that this is perhaps just one cemetery within a broader kind of landscape, or it might be that there's more men in another part of the cemetery. Well, then again, that doesn't mean you need to be any men in another part of the cemetery. They're talking about these two children here, a surprising small number given the high infant mortality of the time. And the other thing as well is these two children could have belonged to the women that are buried in the landscape, and they may be associated with children who are born within Christianity within the Christian community. It's just an idea, folks. So what it's saying is that this is a rather interesting one. The notes that it says here about the skeletal remains of the children. So read that again. Skeletons of the two children have also been found, a surprisingly small number given the high infant mortality at the time. Their burials also have some intriguing features. One, the earth that's been used to backfill the grave looks slightly different to that in the adult graves. Interesting. It's darker and seems more organic. So potentially some time had elapsed between the burial of the adults and the burial of these two children. Is more a mystery. So the children's burials could be more recent or something we don't know. But look at that really nice piece of glass there. Again, that is so much more clearer. So we'll go to the other notes a minute. My cup of coffees. And Michelle, they were asking if you feel better. No, she doesn't feel better. It's just brought me a wonderful coffee. Thank you, Michelle. Margaret was asking after you, Michelle. She's getting more antibiotics tomorrow, and she'll be as high as a kite.
Bless her.
So I'm going to finish reading this bit. Your artifacts at the site are also adding to the puzzle of who these people were. Now, I'm going to talk about the glass in a minute. Andy, you shouldn't have even mentioned this. Shards of pottery and fine etched glass unearthed in the graves were most likely brought to the cemetery by people feasting while they visited the dead. Well, can I translate that a little bit? And I think, Andy, we need to assess this word feasting once and for all, right? This is a really interesting point. When we talk about Neolithic sites, let's have that bit of glass on there a minute as a bit of a context. And when we look at Neolithic sites, they always talk about, they went to causewayed enclosure sites and barrows and whatever, and they would take their food along to feast. And I'm not really sure that using that context is right. What we need to look at the past is that people are going there as we do today. Look, my sister was buried in 2005, right? My mum and dad go there every single Sunday. They take flowers, they take bits and pieces, and they occasionally sit down and have a chocolate bar alongside my sister's grave, right? And this is the same. It's not feasting as in let's have a big old gangbang where people are buried. It's people going along to sit down and communicate with their loved ones. And the best way of assessing this is Etruscan burials. When we look at Etruscan burials, Tuscany, north of Rome, the Etruscan civilization was thus, that you lived as you were buried. So you would recreate a home of the way you lived underground, and your loved ones would go down steps and they would visit you and have conversations with wooden representations of you, or terracotta representations of you, or stone representations of you, and they would sit there and basically say, oh, look, granddad, what would you have done, or grandmother, look at my newborn baby. And lots of these lots of the women figures in Etruscan burials of 700 years BC, which is the same time as the Iron Age, actually. They would have the arms stretched out, so you put your newborn baby on your hands and your arms of your now deceased mum. This is what we're talking about feasting. It's feasting to celebrate those of your loved ones that have passed away, and not that you're having massive debauched feasting banquets at graveyards, which is the wrong way of looking at it. The right way of looking at it is you just go along like my parents do, and they visit my sister every Sunday. So glass is rare. And again, we've got to get to this point quickly. And where it's found at these types of sites is quite significant. It was probably made in the Levant, as we said, north of Egypt. And then it was manufactured into vessels, we think, in southern France, and probably arrived here alongside wine in barrels. I'm not going with that. It's not going to be produced in France. It's going to be produced in the Levant. The presence of these items suggests this was no ordinary community. You see they're admitting that this is no ordinary community of women. You see there. And each person here has been buried with painstaking care. Some laid flat, others crouching, all facing from east to west. Andy, what does that tell you?
Christian.
We usually see, actually, Andy, I'm going to be a bit biased here. I usually say that the orientation means nothing, because we have north-south burials for Christians, but because they're all orientated in that way, and they're all women, and they're all painstakingly buried in a certain way, there's a certain sense of ritual there, Andy. So I'm actually going to go with these being a fairly Christian community. And we're talking about the one woman there. The team don't know why the woman flung into the ditch was treated so differently, but believe she could have been an outcast or a criminal or a Barry resident. So again, unfortunately, you get things like that. Her skeleton shows a healed fracture to her arm, while her tooth was infected and had an abscess, which exposed the roots and must have been painful. And look at that there. Look at that. No, yeah, that's quite exposed. And then it goes on to say 10 of the skeletons are now undergoing more detailed analysis. Now, that's an interesting thing when we talk about archaeology. They're analysing 10 of them. They're not analysing 36, because analysing human remains is exceedingly expensive. So what they're getting a sample. So five of the women look like this. So we'll analyse her. 6 of them over there look like this. We'll analyse that one. So they're getting a sample of 10. The results show the people buried in the cemetery and all from the immediate area. They come from all over Wales and possibly from the southwest of England too. Again, what does that tell you? They tell you about some kind of community that people are going to, and it's specialist. It's a specialist female community. And the only specialist female communities back then would be religious specialist female communities. The team are particularly interested in the skeleton's teeth. Because of the way teeth grow, they provide a unique record of everything someone is eaten from the time they are weaned through to their death. So what we do, we look at strontium analysis. In one area, you get certain levels of strontium. In other areas, you get lower levels of strontium. So if you get a high level of strontium there, and you've got a low level of strontium there, and you've got this on your teeth that you move from there to there, and this is what the strontium analysis tells us. They've been eating a very consistent diet based on lots of carbs, but not a lot of meat. Again, what does that tell you, folks? Christian community, a community which is very significant based on that. And that's true from their childhood into their adulthood. And that's something we're seeing across the burials there. But there was no fish whatsoever. As soon as the Romans leave, we see an absence of fish signals in the diet. It's one of the big mysteries. So there they are excavating, and they're going to be excavating there more in the summer. And actually, it's a place called Fonmon. What it is, the owner of Fonmon, a very wealthy landowner, is allowing access for archaeologists to excavate there. And it's near the airport, but it's not actually part of the airport and that type of thing. So the excavation is continuing this summer, and we'll start to unearth the other half of the cemetery. Andy Seaman is hoping to be able to answer the questions the site has thrown up. Now, folks, if they come up with the conclusion that I've come up with today, right, I'll be quite happy with that. Anyway, we're hoping to tell the story of the individuals within the cemetery, but also the broader community. We know a lot about the lives of kings and queens, but much less about everyday people, and never before really have been able to explore a single community in so much detail and all the interesting interrelationships. But for the moment, there are still many contradictions that remain unsolved, which there always will be in archaeology. Anyway, thank you, Andy, for mentioning that, because sometimes I get so carried away. I talk about this last week and on Wednesday, and I'm glad one of you have mentioned it today. Oh, and let's remember one of the children's graves there. And again, this is an interesting point. I've got to put this to you now quickly. Remember, this is post-Rome. This is in the 500-600s. This isn't the period, Judith, of King Arthur. My God, somebody said any archaeologist releasing King Arthur is not an archaeologist. Oh, fair enough. Anyway, so this is in the 500-600s. Anyway, it's really interesting because 100 years earlier, when this was still the Roman world, and just down the road you've got the early Christian Roman community at Lance Major, and the villa down there as well, at Carmead. Children would not be treated the same if it was a truly Roman community. For these children to be treated the same way as adults tells us that this is a special community. Oh, and can I tell you one thing really, really interesting? I got to tell you this whilst we're on this image, right? Me and Michelle have been thinking about packing up in West Wales and moving to Orkney, and I'll tell you why now. We were going to originally move to Orkney anyway, but anyway, in Orkney, there's something known as the Tomb of the Eagles. And I don't know if about a year or so ago, I said, well, maybe a couple of years ago, I said that, the Tomb of the Eagles in Orkney is closed, political reasons and so on, and COVID. And we had another site called Mine How, which is closed. And that was to do with COVID as well. We couldn't get the visitors in. Anyway, actually a little bit before, actually. Anyway, the point is that one of the big reasons why these places are closing down is that families look after them, who have looked after them for, a generation or more, are basically thinking we want to retire. So lots of tourist attractions on Orkney are closing because families that have run them aren't able to run them anymore. So these tourist attractions are closing. Not because they're not popular or not because people ain't interested in them. They're closing because families ain't able to run them anymore. And the Tomb of the Eagles is back open because what they've done, they've had a nice grant from the National Lottery or something, I think. And the Tomb of the Eagles is now going to be run by volunteers. And it's going to be fab. I really like the Tomb of the Eagles. If ever you go to Orkney, let me know and I might be able to make a phone call. I might be able to well, I still am a university graduate from Orkney. So if you ever do go to the Tomb of the Eagles on Orkney, then please let me know. Right, so let's see if there's anything else anyone would like to say. We're still on that. Anything you'd like to see, Emma and Richard? No?
Anything I'd like
Anything
to
you want
see.
to say, Richard? No? Because-
I haven't
because-
got anything in mind, really.
Because apparently Emma said that she's going to bring you down to the excavation in June for a day. So we'll be happy to see you, Richard.
I'll be there. Yeah.
Good. Well, Emma's driving, so there you go. Judith, anything you want to say? By the way, if Judith can get to your place, Emma, right? You can put her up overnight, and she can come down with you.
I can't
What
make any commitments at the minute.
Well done. I knew you'd say yes. Roger, anything you want to say, love?
No, I just said no.
David?
Oh, thank you.
And Drina. Right. Drina? Okay.
No, nothing from me.
Anyway, and the exciting thing was last week, right? I don't know if you've ever had a new toy, right? I had my brand new Chromebook last. I decided that I would buy a Chromebook, knowing that if anything goes wrong with it, I just chuck it in the bin. So anyway, I got a Chromebook, which I've got a contract with Vodafone now. And do you know what? It's still in the box. I was going to open it today and final edit the Elysic pillar, which is very different, which is going to be going out, and obviously we'll mention if anyone wants to come along to the excavation, we'll put that in there. So last week, what we were talking about peat bogs, and we weren't talking about peat bogs from the sense of burials. We were talking about using peat and peat being used as a fire source. So that's where we're going to go now. But before we start off with any images, let's talk about my experiences of these localities. Right, I gotta get myself. Maybe I could just sit outside with the sheep. That'll be better than just sitting in the car, wouldn't it? You know, hang on. Have we got that there? Hang on a minute. Let's just try and get that sturdy. I can't get this thing sturdy on you. Hang on a minute. Never mind. The cat's going to jump in now as well. It's all happening. See, there's the cat. You want to see the cat?
Oh, what cute.
Oh.
He's my cat. Right. Basically, my experience with peat cutting is that I went looking for some archaeological monuments in the Rhondda Valley this one time, right? And there was there was like a big cut in the ground, right? And I just thought that's a bit weird. It's sort of an organized cut in the ground. And the person with me, I said, well, what's that? And I said, it's peat cutting, right? It's where they've been cutting peat, because I don't know how old the peat cutting was, but that's where they've been cutting peat. Anyway, when I went to Orkney, on one of my visits to Orkney, we went to the island of Stronsay, right? And I was staying with somebody on Stronsay, and he basically said, right, I'm going to take you somewhere. So we went up there, and he said, this is where we cut the peat, because everyone's allowed to cut X amount of peat from the common land for burning on our hearths at home. So I just thought, right, okay, what do I know about peat? Well, last week we came to peat from a roundabout way. Me and Andy had this conversation, and we were talking about lime kilns and using peat to heat up the lime kiln. And I basically said, you can't get peat to burn more than 400 degrees C. And then I'm corrected, and he says 400 to 600 degrees C. So I said, that's not going to be enough, because you need 900 degrees C in the lime kiln, right, in the furnace lime kiln. And then we agreed the thermal shock of the heat going from 400 to 500 to 600, and then the walls and the heat hitting the walls, and it comes back in. And the thermal shock means that the temperature in a peat fired lime kiln is going to be up to 900 degrees C. And that's where we're going to go now. So let's just try and get some images up here, and that's where we're going to look at. And there we are. There's Baldric the turkey. I have promised to bring Baldric up to Arnside, but Michelle's not pleased with Baldric being in the vehicle all the way gobbling at people out the window. So right, I think where we're going to go is a typical peat cutting community. Now, we're in many ways, peat is the understated fuel of our history, really, if we want to put it that way. And if we want to just basically start off by thinking a little bit about peat. So when we try and put when we try and have an overview, we start to think that maybe peat is something that we know was used at least in the Iron Age, and obviously before as well. And this goes back to something that I've mentioned a number of times when you've looked at the Paleolithic past of Britain. You think about burning materials, and just think it's 14,000 years ago. It's the tundra of Russia, and it's cold. You know, nighttime temperatures -40 degrees C, and you've got some mammoth dung lying on the tundra, and it's just been deposited. So what are you going to do with that dung? So what you need to do with that dung, you need to put it on the outside of your shelter. And then the cold air will zap all the moisture out of the dung. And then the dung will then be perfect to burn. And when you think of it that way, you turn it around and you think back to our Iron Age in Britain. So during the Iron Age, peat cutting, we can postulate and understand quite deeply. There was practice for both practical and ritualistic purposes. However, if we want to go even deeper, I can trump this. And when you go to, for example, Skara Brae on Orkney, they talk about peat being used in the buildings at Skara Brae. So that means that they have not only been burning peat since the Iron Age, they've been burning peat from the Neolithic period. Now, this is a very interesting thing. Now, a lot of this is to do with discovery, isn't it? And we think, how do they suddenly start to use iron? How do they start to suddenly think of using lime? How do they start to think about all of these things are accidental? And it even comes back to when you guys were children. You used to go out in the garden, you used to get a bit of clay, you used to get a clay marble and you used to put it in your mum's oven, right? And it used to heat the thing up, and you used to take it outside and use the marble, and then it would rain. And because you didn't heat it at the right temperature, i.e. 500-600 degrees C, which you're not going to get in a domestic oven, it's what's going to happen is it's just going to go back to clay, right? So people are learning bit by bit, because when we think about clay and we think about how clay is going to be utilized in an early stage in the Neolithic period, for example, I've seen clay pots that haven't been fired, and so you put a clay pot next door to a fire. Oh my God, it's solid, right? So all going back to, when did they suddenly discover that they could use peat? Again, by accident, probably. So Iron Age, so it provided a fuel source, and the bogland itself was often considered a sacred place where offerings were made. So in that, if it's a sacred place where offerings are made, or even human offerings, how are you taking the peat out and then burning it and stacking them up like this? Who actually decides that you can actually burn mud? Because that's what it is. Well, it's not mud, is it? But it's organic material, really. Actually, mud's mainly organic material. But it's not just it's not just mud. It's full of sphagnum moss. It's full of leaves. It's full of dead creatures. Loads of stuff, right? And it's all compacted together. That's what peat is. And when it's dried out, it's a brilliant fuel. So, but I think when we talk about the actual understanding that we know the likes of peat is being cut and actually used as fuel, and the widespread practice and the evidence for that does come from the late Bronze Age and the Iron Age, really. So at least by about 800 years BC. So practical uses, just a bit of an overview, and we'll go into a bit more detail. Fuel. Peat was used as a primary fuel source for heating, cooking in the Iron Age, and this is what we're really starting to think. And actually, this is a really interesting point, which is very difficult to get my head around. Peat coal, right, was found to be more effective than charcoal for smelting iron, leading to increased peat cutting in the Iron Age. Right, so what you need to melt iron is close on 1,600 degrees C, right? Basically 1,580 or something degrees C, right? So somewhere along the line, peat and the effect of the rising temperatures, peat can get up to quite high temperatures, which is quite surprising actually. So peat cutting also contributed to the expansion of agricultural land as forests were cleared for timber or fuel. So when we go back to thinking about, so again, thinking about peat cutting and thinking about these very people, right, and getting into the minds of these very interesting people, right? It's again the idea that you're going into a peat bog, you're cutting peat, and these sacred places, the wet locations, the peat bogs, even though they were sacred, you're still cutting the peat to actually burn. And I think that's quite odd, really, because you might cut into peat bogs and actually come across human remains. How does that work? How does that really work? And again, what we've mentioned lots of localities where you actually get bodies in peat bogs. The Grabal man, remember that Grabal man from Denmark? He's got the noose around his neck, buried naked with a sheepskin cap and noose around his neck. Ritual deposition in a peat bog. And obviously, these are the same places you're cutting peat. Lindo man, as you know, the Lindo peat bog. Now, that's an interesting one. Lindo man directly relates this into the subject that we're talking about. So Lindo man, peat marsh, this ancient bog body was found in a peat bog in England with evidence of injuries that may have been part of a ritual and sacrifice. So with the industrial cutting of peat within Lindo Moss, where Lindo man is found, peat marsh in other words, the irony is that they're cutting peat in a modern day and age and then drying it out, or they're cutting the peat, but they're either drying it out for fuel or they're probably more likely drying it out so you can put it on your allotment, right? The irony is that then they find the bodies, so the peat bog finding the bodies. So so what we've got, we don't mention Scotland much with peat bogs, but there's a place called Deskford in Scotland. Archaeological finds in Scotland, including smashed pottery, statues of Lloyd George, joints of meat, charm stones were found in pits cut into a peat bog, suggesting ritual practices. And lots of the peat bogs, we've gone away slightly from the subject a minute, but a Frugusgrad and archaeological finds in Denmark, including peat and various other deposits, provide evidence of Iron Age peat cutting and subsequent ritual deposits in bogs. So in other words, peat itself is quite an interesting landscape. One minute you're cutting it to burn, and modern day and age you're using it to put on your flower beds, and back then they're using it to burn. So let's go into the meat and two veg about this. And I just wanted I wanted to, like last week we did sort of from the context of the modern day and age and the Iron Age day and age with the likes of lime, right? This is where we're sort of going to go with this. So the peat industry. So in regards to the peat industry, these images are actually taken from Somerset's Avalon marshes. And again, this links in with Francis Fryer's site of Flag Fen, right? Because that's peaty. So are we going to cut all that peat out and we're going to actually use it to burn? Or are we going to cut it and put on flower beds? What are we going to do with it, right? So, but this is Somerset now. So the peat industry. So, you know, when we look at archaeology, what we do, we like to say they're producing pottery, they're producing iron, they're producing copper, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're doing that. You don't talk about lime and you don't talk about peat cutters, you know? So peat is central, particularly to the character and history of Somerset and the likes of Peterborough. Somerset Avalon marshes, however, in our case, it preserved some outstanding archaeology, as we know, the Glastonbury Lake villages and the Mere Lake villages. But many times when the peat is being cut, alongside the archaeology, beautiful fuel was a vital fuel for local people, provided rich grazing throughout dry summers. And in the 1900s, the peat industry was a big employer of local people. And the looks of it always has been. Many of the worked out areas are now nature reserves, because what happens, you cut all this stuff out, the big holes of water, and it's full of animals and stuff. But peat extraction still continues today and remains part of the local community and the economy. So you can still see this peat cutting in little cell. You still see it in Orkney, still sort of see it down in Somerset and Peterborough landscape as well. And in lots of areas of an island, actually, they still do a lot of peat cutting. But the peat cutting usually today is actually for your flower beds, not actually burning. Now, you might think that peat cutting has a detrimental impact on the environment. And they've started to talk about peat-based composts being banned from sale in the next few years. But that's probably not going to change anything. The archaeology is still going to be damaged, because the landscape is being naturally drained anyway. It's not just the peat cutting; it's naturally being drained for farming purposes. So, like the lime manufacturing process that we talked about last week, where you've got big cement works and you add a little bit of aggregate in there, right? Which makes cement for your concrete and your mortars, right? Not many people produce lime anymore, right? And again, not many people cut peat for it to be burned. I don't know where the UK government comes in with burning peat. God, can you imagine sat down with the Prime Minister and looking at his environmental, right? Certain communities cannot burn wood anymore, right? It's illegal to burn wood in certain parts of Wales, right? You're not allowed to burn wood or coal in certain parts of Wales, which is really odd. Is this going to be the same as burning peat, right? As people totally stop burning peat? And the answer is no. So what is peat, for example? What actually is peat? Again, I'll mention a little bit about it, but let's look at it a bit more in detail. Peat is the partially decayed, I didn't mention that earlier on, decayed remains of organic matter such as reeds, the sedges associated with the reeds, mosses, even tree wood, leaves, everything, and even little creatures. It forms in wet environments where the acid and low levels of oxygen halts decay. So peat is this ties in again with Flag Fen. So peat itself is anaerobic, right? So that basically means that there's little oxygen, and that means that the material in there could be 1,000 years old, 2,000 years old, 3,000 years old, right? But it hasn't completely decayed, right? If it has decayed, you're burning mud. That's basically it, right? You are burning mud if it's decayed totally and it's gone and it's been mixed up with clays and sands and stuff, right? But because it's not really it's not really decayed properly, right? And when you dry it out, it burns perfectly. And there's another thing as well is I don't know if anyone gets squeamish about burning insects. I do. Whenever I'm burning wood, I tap the wood to make sure all the wood lice are out of it, and I can't kill anything. Right? I beat somebody up and ended up nearly being sent to the police when I was in school because somebody stepped on an ant. I don't do that anymore. But the point is, when you burn peat, is there's not going to be any creatures in it. So you dry it out, you burn it, it's fine. That's basically what peat is. So anaerobic conditions, any peat itself, nothing living in it, right? But the material hasn't completely rotted down. So the marshes that these people are standing at, the peat being formed in the Avalon marshes, is over 7,000 years old, and in lots of areas of Britain, it's still forming today. Now, there are ancient peats in this country. There are peats that are much older than 7,000 years old, but there's layers and layers and layers, and it's compacted and compacted. And eventually, what will happen, millions of years down the line, the peat that's being formed today will actually turn into rock. Oh, well, actually, it'll turn into coal, but that's a long way to go. That's basically what peat is. It's coal, or coal is peat. So the lowest layers of peat started as reed swamp, then wet woodland, and finally huge raised bogs. Hence, we talk about the people living within the Glastonbury landscape. So I wonder if they sound a bit like this. I don't think they do there. This is Glastonbury. They sound very, very different to Glastonbury. Anyway, so the peat diggers had names and different uses for each of these layers, reflecting the plant life from which they were formed. Now, this is really, really interesting. This is a really interesting point. As people who want to learn about peat cutting, right? There's different standards of peat, right? Like there's different standards of limestone that you can use for different things. And you have your lias limestone and your carboniferous limestone. 1 second. Michelle, did you want to take Flanny Flipple into the wood? Take the key for Flanny Flipple. You go. You go. Take Flanny Flipple. So basically, what we've got here is that the this is also a bit like archaeologists when we say you got the topsoil, you got the subsoil, you got the regolith, and you got the bedrock. Right? With peat cutters, this is it. So the peat topsoil is not a peat at all, but rich organic soil. So it's soil. That's what I'm saying. It's everything's rotted away. It's just basically soil. Mentioned that anyway. Light peat, mainly formed from sphagnum moss, which retains water well. So you might be able to burn the light peat, but it's probably better that you use it on your garden, right? So that's your light peat, your best black peat. Oh, here we go. Now, there's something involving whiskey here, right? Your best black peat, right? So your best, this is black, not brownie black. This is black. Okay. Somerset sedge peat, which is dark grey black, basically black, or sort of slightly off black. It can be dried into hard blocks for burning and is good garden peat. So it could be used for both, really. In most areas, this is by far the thickest of the layers, 4,000 up to 4,000 years ago. So there's also something else that you can learn from peat, is the thickness of the layers. So the best peat, the most populous of peat, formed 4,000 years ago, right, is all to do with environmental changes in Britain. What's happening 4,000 years ago? In the upland areas are being abandoned. What's happening 4,000 years ago? Trees have either been blown down, cut down, they've had a disease, and peat bogs take over those upland areas. That's what happens 4,000 years ago. What happens 4,000 years ago? Nobody's farming those upland areas. That's the best black peat, and that's why it's there. Fenwood peat contains the remains of willow, birch, and alder, which grew in wet woodland. Now, this is when Britain is still a massive forest of woodland. This is when our ancestors 5,500 years ago are still trying to tame the good old wildwood. Okay, and within that peat, there's a lot more willow, birch, and alder. There's a lot more of the heavier stuff, the stuff that is not really going to rot down really, really readily quick. And this is the thing. This is also a good indicator when you're augering a landscape, right? And you're looking for you're looking for seeds, and you're looking for pollen and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The different layers of peat and what's in the peat help us date that peat. And then what you've got is that's fenwood peat is below your best black peat. And then you've got your fenwood peat, which has got your willow, your birch, and all that type of stuff. And the lowest peat possible is your fen peat. And this is basically formed from more or less glacial lakes that have been there for time immemorial, 6,000-7,000 years ago. A bit like what's going on with the likes of Starcar up near Scarborough. So that's your fen peat, your reedy peat. So and also your best peat for whiskey. I'll go on. Oh, I was actually going to be investing in a barrel of whiskey, and with a company, and I haven't got any money to buy to buy a barrel of whiskey now. But the best whiskey is going to be associated with your best black peat. So that's going to be your best the runoff acidic water that comes from your best black peat is your best for your whiskey. God, you ain't like half learning stuff today, folks. So a window into the past. So the waterlogged peat of the Avalon marshes gives us a window into the past. It has been preserved and uniquely rich archaeology. So in other words, the peat itself is archaeology. Without having archaeology in it, it gives you a history of the archaeology. And also when actually I've said this, but we've missed something at the same time. When you're going across a landscape and it's peaty, and then suddenly you've got big holes, that means that people have cut peat. When have they cut that peat? Right, that's the big question, right? When have they cut that peat? And I'll give you a clue. I'll give you a clue, right? So here we go. So if you're going to if you're gonna I gotta get this right. I gotta get my maths in my head right. So if say for example, let's do a little bit of a table on the side here. So basically, you've got your peat topsoil there. You've got your light peat there, and you've got your best black peat there. And let's go to your fenwood peat there. You've got the one below that, which is your fen peat. So to try and date when they're cutting peat, right? I gotta try and get the maths on this a minute. I gotta get my head in gear. Right, this is really complex. I don't know why I've set myself up for falling on this one. So if you're trying to work out that it's right, I've worked it out. Right, okay. So if you're looking, for a big hole in the ground, right, and you dig through the hole in the ground and you find the top bit, which you've got the P there, you find the peat topsoil, that's there, right? But there's a depression in the ground. You dig a bit deeper, you get your light peat, right? Which has got your sphagnum moss and stuff in it. There's a bit of water in there, right? Guess what? It's been worked in the Iron Age because that's not there. Because you go directly down to your fenwood peat. So do you know what I'm saying? So if you're analysing, if you're trying to work out if they're cutting peat in the Iron Age, in upland areas, what's going to happen is that say they don't go deep enough and they ignore the fenwood peat at the bottom, which dates back to 4,000 years ago, which is not the Iron Age, right? And if all that layer of best black peat, which is formed between 4 and 2,000 years ago, all that's gone, and then you've got a layer of light peat above it, the only conclusion you can get to is that B was cut in the Iron Age. Can you see how good that is? Did everyone get that bit? I nearly didn't get that. I nearly didn't get that on that one, but I did it. See, proud of myself for that one. So this is a window in the past. The waterlogged peat of the Avalon marshes gives us a window into the past. It has preserved a unique, rich archaeology, in particular the Sweet Track and Glastonbury Lake Village. So that the point is when we talk about, for example, we talk, oh God, I got to get this word out. We talk about flag fen, and we talk about the draining of flag fen. It's not really to do with the cutting of peat, because there's a lot of peat within the flag fen landscape that hasn't been cut. And the landscape's been drained for lots of reasons. And other agriculture is one of those reasons. Because what's happening is that within this landscape, you've still got the peat topsoil, which is actually broken down, which is very rich for planting your crops, for example. So a window into the past, the waterlogged peat of the Avalon marshes gives us a window into the past. It has preserved a unique, rich archaeology. It also gives us an indication of what the surrounding landscape was like through the pollen record preserved in the peat. So this is really important. Reading these layers, it's like a normal, well, in fact, peat preserves so much of the archaeology that you're not going to get elsewhere. So wet peat, peat that you've just cut like that, is like a sponge. But peats such as sedge peat can be dried into hard blocks, basically like this, known as turfs or turves or turfs or turfs, Turves, which can then be burnt as a fuel. We know that peat has been burnt, as we've already said, for thousands of years. The Romans used it to heat salterns. Yes, salterns are big pans used to extract salt from the seawater by boiling off the water. We've already mentioned this about salterns and evidence of salt being harvested in the Iron Age. We've already done that bit. The communities who lived on the highlands of the adjacent hills and islands often had a turbary rights to dig peat. That's exactly the rights that we've got in the likes of Orkney, turbary rights, Turbary, turbary rights to dig peat on what was the common land of the marshes. Each parish would have an area of peat moor for grazing. So again, now this is really powerful again, because when we look at the medieval landscape, it is quite simple, but it's not. When we look at the medieval landscape 8,000 years ago, we say, for example, right, let's think about the turf landscape. Lord of the Manor there, right, and his little Demesne, right, his little sort of estate Demesne. And then what you've got the Reeve and his house, and then you've got who looks after the village, it's like the sheriff, and you've got all the little houses, and each of these houses belongs to the Lord of the Manor. And then you've got a patchwork of landscape. So you've got like different areas that are farmed at different times, right? So and you have one left for grazing. So 4 under plough, 1 left for grazing, and you're alternating this. So and then what you talk about the common woodland, where everyone can collect wood, not timber, wood. Timber's used for building houses. Wood is used for fires. There's a differentiation there. Timber and wood. Timber for building, wood. So there's a woodland, hence woodland. You collect your wood, not timber. It's not a timberland. It's a woodland, right? You collect your wood for burning. Everyone's allowed to collect wood, but not timber from the woodland, right? And then what you've got a common land for grazing, and everyone can use the common land. But what you don't hear about is land that the community has had set aside for them for the turbary rights. So local families would cut and dry peat during the summer months, ready for cold winter days. Some of this peat might be sold in local towns as an important source of income. Now, I don't know if that's acceptable. I really don't know if that's acceptable because you're making money from common land. But nevertheless, it's a really, really important thing to be saying. Now, these stacking these, in other words, the mumps, yes, they're called known as mumps, MUMPS, or the tivs, TURVES, or the hyles, HYLES, or the ruckles. Turfing, they're turfing. This is turfing, but they're not turfs, as in F. Turfs is where you're stacking them with a V, TURVES, not turfing, where you cut turfs of grass. Is very different. The process of cutting peat had a language of its own, and I'm very lucky to live in West Wales, and for how long I don't know, but I'm very lucky to be living in West Wales. There's a place called Aberaeron, and they actually, in the 1800s, they were known for having their own turf cutters, right, which were basically shaped like a bit of a teardrop, right, and they were known, and we've actually got one here. So if anyone comes down in June, you can see our turf cutter made locally. So this is really important. So it was a manual process which saw whole families out on the moors, father digging the mumps and then splitting them into turfs. So digging the mumps. So in other words, these are all called mumps, right? They're all called turfs, but it's the generic. So once it's in the ground, you're digging the mumps, which is what these are, but these are stacked, and then splitting them into turfs, TURVAS. Again, these are turfs. Wives and children building the hyles tates, which is the HYLES tates. This is a stack. A tate is a stack of these hyles. Hyles as turfs. See, I knew I could confuse you, and you can call them the ruckles. So in other words, there's so many different names for that block there, those blocks there. There they go. So many different names. But it's the process of how you cut them. So mumps is you cut them out the ground and then you stack them. And then when you stack them, they're known as turfs after they've been split. And they're stacked in hyles or tates. Love it. Or ruckles. Grandparents helping where they could. It was hard physical work. A wet mump could weigh 12 kilograms. Wow. And ruckles were taller than a man. These ruckles contained around 1,000 tivs, or the pile of mumps, the ruckles, otherwise known as the hyles or the tates. I'm hoping everyone's getting so confused here. So canals and railways, good and bad. So in the 1800s, saw the construction of the Glastonbury Canal and then the Somerset Central Railway. Improved transport helped peat companies to develop the trade in burning peat. However, improved transport also meant cheaper coal, which drove the need to develop new uses for peat. So hence why it ends up on your garden, right? So we're going to do a little bit more on just a little bit more about the sort of peat industry today, and probably give you a little bit more about that. Not as much because we're actually meant to be doing archaeology here. But I'll tell you something, right? I'll tell you a little story, right? I'm not a big fan of metal detectors, as you know, but however, right, if you ever get a bag of peat from Ireland, right, go over it with a metal detector, right? Because if your metal detector goes beep, 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 it means that you've got bog oak. And no, start again. Bog oak.
Bog
Yeah,
iron.
you've got bog. Yeah, you can't metal detect bog oak. Let's start. And Margaret, only one of you got that. Once you're going over the it's been a long day. When you're going over the peat bag and you metal detect over it, what you come across, Margaret?
Bog iron.
You come across bog iron, not bog oak, or bog off, which
Or
is something else.
bog
Or bog off. Yeah, you actually come across bog iron. It's amazing. I worked next door to a garden centre once, and this woman said, "Oh, come and have a look at this. Come and have a look at this. Come into my bedroom," she said, "and look what's on my dresser." And I just thought, what's going on here? And she had a piece. She said, "This is my pride of joy." I was out in the garden, right? And I was opening the bag of peat, and I found this iron thing, and she thought it was like a special thing that had been votively left in a bog in Ireland, and I didn't tell her it was bog iron, right? And I tell you what, Margaret, I was invited into another woman's bedroom, right, to actually see, right. Rog, don't get too excited, right? Mind you, she was 90, right? But there's no levels to love, is there? Right. So Rog, she actually said, "Come over here." She said, "Come over here," and she showed me a mammoth tooth on her dresser. On that note, we'll do a little bit more about Peat after the break, and we'll find out if there's any questions, right? Rog,
Back in early, Carl.
what did you say?
Yeah, so the still recovering from all our journeys. So I'll.
You're leaving me?
Oh.
Roger,
Yes.
Roger, do you want to hear one more story about me being invited into a woman's bedroom, right?
No, it's getting too embarrassing.
No, Rog. I went into this one woman's house. She said, you're interested in shipwrecks. I said, yeah. She said, I hope your wife don't mind. I said, what? She said, I want to take you upstairs, she said. And I thought, hang on a minute, this ain't gonna go well, is it? It's really not gonna go well. So she said, I'll go upstairs first, and I gotta sort the bedroom out. And I thought, all right, there's something not quite right here, right? So she's then shouted, she called me James, you see. She said, "James, come upstairs, James." She said, "Come and have a look at this, James." And I'm just thinking, oh my God. She came out of the bedroom and she was pointing up at the ceiling, right? And she said, "Look at this." And a whole house, right, was made of shipwreck timber.
Wow, fantastic.
So do you know what? I am so pleased to be invited into women's bedrooms because you find wonderful things in them.
Yeah.
Timbers.
You boys. Oh, disgusting. What would your mother say? Oh.
Right. So anything you want to say, Rog, before you leave us?
Right. Nice to see you all. See you next week. And,
nice to see you. To see you guys.
Good to see you, Rog. Take care.
See us. Yeah. Take care. All. Interesting. A whole lot of facts there, but still trying to remember everything. Okay,
Rog,
then. Take care.
Just remember the Ruckles, and you're there.
Yeah.
Bye, Rog.
Right. See you, mate.
Bye,
lad. And the dig. I would have been down there, but not now. Okay, then.
Hang on a minute. Emma will give you a lift in her car.
Yeah, well. See you next week.
The car is filling up now. There's Judith, there's Richard, there's you. Flipping heck.
Gonna have to get a bigger car.
Going down in your car. Nursing wheels. Yeah.
Hey, hang on a minute. Hey, Rog, I pulled today. I was driving through Treorchy, right? Michelle was in the car, right? And this guy followed us down the street saying, "Oh my God, he's got a Peugeot 306 from 25 years ago. Look at that." And we had everyone looking at the car because my car has been washed.
Wonderful. Keep enjoying it all. See you next week.
Yeah.
Bye, Rog.
Bye, Roger.
Hi, Roger.
Bye, Rog.
Is that the
Oh.
secret then? Wash your car.
Yeah, I gotta be honest with you. When I washed my car the other day, it's been part of Michelle's illness recently. Since then, she's been downhill. I said, "Come and have a look at this car, Michelle. I washed it." She said, "You haven't. Don't you tell your lies." She said, "I washed my car and I hoovered it as well." She said, "My God, in all the years I've known you, you've never washed once." Oh,
Yeah, losing the plot.
exactly.
I wait till it rains.
Andy, shut up. I'm not interested in anything you got to say, Andy. Right, talking about Andy. Anything you want to say, Andy?
No, Pete, it only dawned on me last week when we were talking about it, how it's an area that is just not talked about in archaeology much at all. And yet it's been there right the way through. And it's dateable.
Yeah.
Whatever
It is. I've just
carbon
demonstrated
based.
it.
So it's, you can carbon date it, anything really quite accurately.
Yeah.
So I don't know why it's been ignored so much. And like you said, it's been used for centuries. Well, not centuries, millennium.
Yeah. And if you again, Andy, I didn't go deep in the sequence. If you went to the Fenland Peat at the bottom and say you're excavating through and that big layer's gone at the bottom, you know that people were processing peat.
Yeah.
5,000 years ago. If that layer's missing because it's been quarried out, right?
Yeah.
So it's dateable, and the practice of using this is dateable as well.
Yeah, and it also, depending on how much they've taken out, dramatically changes the landscape as well.
Yeah. And it creates new lakes and all sorts of things. Yeah, it does. Yeah. But in upland areas, it's not. But the thing is, you're going to get all sorts of things like soil creep is going to completely, my French, bastardize the landscape. You're going to have whole sort
the
of
upland areas got left, didn't they? They, just when the people moved out of them, and they never went back, which is really odd. So.
And people who've abandoned ruckles in fields, and you're thinking, what's that mound of stuff over there? It's so good to be that pile of stuff over there. The ruckles, there they are.
Yeah.
They're just
Ruckles.
Yeah.
With this technology, could this technology, or was it more widespread? You've mentioned in Britain and Ireland, but was it, was it well known across more of the world? Do you know?
Well, the thing is, if you think of somewhere like Cyprus, you're not really not going to have peace. But if you look at somewhere like Germany, you're going to have it. If you have somewhere like Switzerland, you're going to have it. You're going to have it in Scandinavian countries. Peat, without doubt, is something that's been processed in Ireland in much longer than we have.
Yeah.
So wherever you've got areas where peat is being built up, then it's going to be used. But it goes back to this thing, doesn't it? We know that peat is, and Andy's right, but we don't know enough about it. We know that it's being used, right? It's the assumption it's being used everywhere else, but maybe people haven't used it everywhere else.
Yeah.
It's like the same as okay, did Native Americans use lime on their fields? Right. There's limestone in America, but did they use lime in their fields? It's not for want of technology. They could have had the technology to spread lime on their fields in North America, but they choose maybe not to. I'm out of my depth. Somebody could be watching this and think, yes, we've got evidence of Native Americans using lime, but because it doesn't, it's like this thing. This is a really bad example. Some countries in some countries in the world use uranium, and they've got uranium in China, and they're going to use it for all sorts of things. But other countries in Africa, they might have uranium, but they don't use it. That's a really bad example, folks. But I think we know what we're talking about. Just because you got the ability and access to maybe having that technology, doesn't mean to say they're going to use it. For example, there's iron in North America, right? There's iron in Central America, but the only iron that Central Americans used was meteoric iron, right? They didn't actually have an iron age in Central America, right? And that it's not because they didn't have the technology, because they did, right? It's that they chose not to access an iron industry in Central America.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. David, love.
No, thank you.
I tell you, second half's going to be short now. Margaret.
Well, not far from here, there's a nature reserve called Foulshaw Moss, and it's been taken over by the Cumbria Wildlife Trust to reverse damage that's been done. But it's a raised bog, and in places it's about 5 or 6 meters deep, with peat formed from sphagnum moss over thousands of years.
Thousands.
But, they're trying to reverse the damage that was done by drainage and
I think
afforestation.
I think there's a point to be made here that I don't think peat cutters are the ones to blame for draining the landscape.
No.
Because when you cut the peat, you've got a big hole in the ground and it's full of water, right? Mm. It's when the landscape's actually drained. We do blame peat cutters. I can remember being in school. We used to think, these peat cutters are terrible people. They're but it's not the peat cutters who are draining the landscape. It's actually the people draining the landscape. That's the point.
I wonder, is it still used as a fuel? Because it's a fossil fuel, it's almost as bad as cutting a forest down, isn't it?
I don't think using peat is banned from burning, because not enough people burn it. But if you started going to local authorities, by the way, the guy down the road is burning peat, I'm sure they would start banning it.
Yeah. There are regulations of peat cutting, I think, now.
Should be, yes. Yeah.
But I did go to Ireland a few years back and was in a place where the room was heated with peat, which is quite an unusual thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would imagine that because they found bog bodies in Scandinavia, I'm sure they did peat cutting there.
Oh, Guabelman in Denmark was found by peat cutting. Lots of these bodies are actually a bike. One second, I've just got one sec. Any chance to get another one, please, darling? I know you're not well.
Oh.
Cheers. Just put. Cheers, lovely. Anyway, so she's just putting the goats to bed. But lots of these places where we're getting bog bodies are actually places that we're peat cutting. But it's because we've been peat cutting. Lindo peat marsh was found because we were peat cutting in Lindo Moss.
Okay.
So they would have been found otherwise. So there you go. Drina, anything quickly?
No, thank you.
And what about you, Emma and David? Oh, Emma wants me to mention the fan club, the Karl-James Langford fan club. And if you get your Facebook details over to Emma, she'll send you an invite. You have extra things from the fan club.
Oh wow! Like what?
I might actually be. There might be a nice pirate flagon, right? Which I've had on the table for a long time. Which I might think, right, it might be a prize for the fan club. So there you go.
And a statue of Lloyd George, I've no doubt.
No, that's not going, because it's been blessed by my own ancestors, my own blood, right? No.
Oh,
no.
Shucks, I'm not joining then.
All right, then, we'll have a statue of Lloyd George. Anything to keep you happy. Right, anything from Emma or David, Richard, whatever his name is now.
Yeah, not from us.
Richard enjoyed the whole evening. Very relaxing, interesting.
Good. Well, we haven't finished yet, so we've got the last bit.
Yeah, it hasn't finished yet.
So we'll go until about, I don't know. We'll probably just gone past about 1/4 past. So if we have like I don't know, a 15-minute break now, we haven't got much left, so we'll try and be back um about
10
50
minutes.
about 8:55. You got 12 minutes. Go off and have a cup of tea and play cricket.
All right.
And whatever you do, that box of matches and petrol, don't play with it.
I like the look of that.
Right, break.
I've disappeared.
Yeah, I've got to go wee.
I'm sure I did puff early this morning on that free sailor.
No, I don't think you did.
Mhm.
No, never did it. I'll do it now.
Ah.
Here's tea. Yeah. Dad, have your own reason. Oh no, you're smoking. That's why. For the cooking. Oh. Oh, wait, so now I think that's a bit. Yeah, oh, I I'm just using some more honey. I don't know, that's one of my big say. Oh wow. This is for me though. Got one.
No, no.
Bed
Yeah.
right, which one's your bed one? These then. Oh yeah. Yeah, I've got it. Sorry. No, it's in the car.
Well, that will know we'll go there in June.
Okay.
They've got, say, I'll only go as Margaret's going.
What was that?
Say, I'll only go as Margaret's going.
Oh,
That'll encourage them to have a meeting there. Very sweet. I feel our destinies are intertwined somehow. With the goals.
well, we'll see.
Oh, I was described my life all over the place. We just get unpaid. You shoot, to flute goes out.
Right, there's your bed one.
Right.
Shall I leave the tea bag in?
Oh,
That is a bad cough, Dad.
that's why I went to the doctor, but she didn't think.
You didn't think it was an infection then?
Really makes a change, doesn't it?
Mm.
I'm going through far too much coffee.
How's life in Grange, David?
Quiet again after the holiday.
Is it?
Mm.
Yes, it is here, actually.
It hasn't been very warm till today.
It's still nice now. I've just been outside and it's still light. It's a lovely evening. Do you have a view over the bay from your house?
No. It faces the bay, but there's trees between
Oh,
and houses.
I can just about see the train going over the viaduct. But Andy's got a good view where you've been to Andy's, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Andy? Andy?
Yes.
You know, you mentioned about high radon levels in this area.
Well, specifically on my road, but
Well,
yeah.
it is when I look on my deeds, it's very high where I am.
Mm.
And I believe it can cause a touch of dementia.
Yeah, they're connecting it with particularly with lung cancer and dementia now. Yeah.
Well, Tony died of lung cancer in the end, but
Yeah.
I mean, his was, I don't think it was anything to do with radon. But I'm definitely getting very forgetful. I don't know if it's just natural aging or if it's to do with the radon.
It's very difficult to prove, I would think.
Yeah.
So.
But did you say you could get some kind of gadget?
Yeah, well, I think we're probably going to get one in the next couple of months and find out. You can get about 420 odd quid. You get a meter, and it will read it.
Where do you get one of those from?
Online.
There's and when you've got the reading, is there anything you can do about it apart from move? Oh, you can.
Yeah. There's quite a few buildings in the village have already got them. They do is they vent. It's heavier than air.
Yeah.
Which is deceptive because it would, you think therefore it collects in the under the floor or in the basement or whatever.
Yeah.
But with the natural convection of warmth in the house, it brings it back up into the house. So it's important to take readings if you have a basement, in the basement, but in your living room and in your bedroom where you're obviously going to be spending quite a bit of time.
Right.
But you can vent it. All it is just like a pipe with a fan in it, and it sucks it out, and that's fine apparently. So.
So do you think you're going to get one?
Well, we'll see what the readings are.
Open, I suppose. Then, if you at night, to go to sleep, you can keep your bed warm and keep your windows open.
Yes,
maybe something like that. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that the ventilation was part of it.
Well, it's been around for a while. They've known about it for a long time, but I think they've only recently connected it with lung cancer and dementia.
So, oh, blimey.
There's a vent on the school. If you look at the school from Church Hill, you'll see on the left hand side of it a big black pipe going up from underneath. That's what that is. Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Radon gas.
All right.
Right, we're back on it, folks. 8:57, straight back down to the undies. We're doing a tiny bit of field system stuff today, right? And I want to do the currency bar stuff. I still don't really know as much as I want to do about that, but we're going to do a little bit more peating, and then we'll crack on to that. So, radon, eh? Radon. Who needs it? Who needs the radon? Horrible radon. horrible. So who actually invented it? Anyway, right. Anyway, where were we? What we'll do? We'll do a little bit more Peat, and then I want to just do a little bit of currency bit and a bit of sort of agriculturally type stuff. So right, okay, ridge and furrowing. Right, so we've done that bit there. Oh right, yeah. Right, okay. Let's just see what I can do now. There's another bit of stuff. So right. So obviously we're talking about this in a modern context, and when I think one of the biggest criticisms when we talk about peat and peat cutting is this idea that it's industrialized and there's big companies making a lot of money out of peat. And they're basically this is rather interesting. This this is very odd. In the 1900s, they had built factories to use peat for something else. They were making peat into bedding for animals, known as peat litter. And then they would sell hamel for putting greens and race courses. So basically, it's that obviously almost like wood chips, isn't it? So obviously, as a business, with large businesses involved in cutting peat on an industrial scale, that's where you get to Lindo Moss and where you've got the belt cutters, and it's very industrial, and you've got peat being cut in places like Ireland, for example, and it's even though what the revolution has been is that people started thinking, oh, not many people are using peat anymore. To burn with. What else are we going to do with it? We've got everything in place. We've got the industry in place. So it's then become big for companies like B&Q and Physions that are expanding and cutting peat. So there's a lot of money in this, and apparently Fissons, which is one of the big companies, which you probably have seen on bags of peat, their annual drying of peat after cutting equates to 250,000 tons. So as Andy said, this is having a massive impact on the landscape, right? And there's pros and cons for cutting peat. Now, this is we've mentioned a little bit about the environment. Is peat good for the environment and so on? And it's lots of things now where peat cutting has stopped. And the peat industry today, peat digging continues on a very much smaller scale. Small local businesses, all of whom have operated for hundreds of years, if not a lot longer than that. Our family industries operating for a lot longer than hundreds of years. And what they're trying to do is get these companies to work with the environment, and so obviously, they're now starting to say, even though it's no longer really done by hand, what they're trying to do is they're trying to reduce the impact of the industrial peat extraction. And finally, as peat comes to the end, they're saying the government started in May 2021 to start looking into completely banning the sale of peat by 2024, but that's not actually happened. And it's likely that peat as something that's being used for fuel, and as being used on people's gardens, will be outlawed as illegal by 2030. But that would need immense laws to stop people's rights in cutting peat. So watch this space. So what I'm gonna mention just a little couple of things about peat at the end now. We're gonna mention. Here we go. We're gonna mention. We've expanded quite deeply the fact that peat's historically being used, and it may not be permitted or maybe be permitted beyond 2030. The industry has faced increasing scrutiny due to its environmental impacts, particularly the release of stored carbon dioxide when peat is disturbed. So obviously carbon dioxide is kept in peat. And so historical context, just a few historical points finally. So we know that there's a lot of peat extraction in the Roman period. And actually, Andy, when have you ever heard an archaeologist talk about peat extraction in the Roman period? Never. Never heard it on Time Team, have you? Peat was used as an alternate fuel source. We know that. Something known as the Crofters Act in 1886 introduced the right to cut peat, gather seaweed and burn seaweed, and access common grazing land, which still stands today, although many traditional crofts have transitioned to other fuel sources. So the peat cutting industry, known as turbery on Exmoor, was a common right and involved cutting, transporting, and storing peat. The industry was also a source of labor, which it's like it's almost as like a feudal thing, peat, with bond tenants often obligated to work turberies, the areas where peat was excavated, whole families. And things are changing. And we've mentioned about the environmental impact and restoring the landscapes. So what we're going to basically mention next is, I think it might be appropriate to mention a little bit about the landscape, right? So I managed to work this thing out. So we're going to go back to some images from last week. And, oh, actually not from last week. This is overall Middle Iron Age look at the Middle Iron Age landscape, right? And this is directly linked with the agriculture and the way field patterns are laid out, which is something we'll look at a lot of detail next week. And again, this is typically looking at an Iron Age landscape and how this Iron Age landscape keys in with, for example, this absolutely beautiful image that I showed you last week. Now, I have got, and I showed you this last week, I've got an aerial view of some Iron Age landscapes, which are from Royal Commission on Ancient Monuments, which I'm going to show you next week. So we're going to have a look at that. I just wanted to just mention a little bit about these wonderful landscapes from the Iron Age. Now, so what we've got, it specifically says, so if we go back to this one, this is a typically Iron Age landscape, which is now abandoned in an area. So while the term Iron Age ridge and furrow can be misleading, it's important to understand that ridge and furrow is primarily a medieval agricultural technique and not directly associated with the Iron Age. When we talk about ridge and furrow in the Iron Age, you've got a ridge and a furrow alongside it, and a ridge and a furrow alongside it, and that's a patterned landscape. So what you get typically when you talk about ridge and furrow in a medieval landscape is that you get, hang on a minute, wrong color. You get all these lines like this, right? And then a medieval landscape, you'd have them like this, and then you'd have it like this, right? It'd be like a chessboard effect, right? And you don't need, with a ridge and furrow landscape, hedges, because that's where you're going to plant the beans, and that's where you're going to plant the carrots, and that's where you're going to plant the cabbages, right? So this was typically a medieval ridge and furrow landscape, but the rules themselves still stand the same when you're talking about an Iron Age landscape. So very important, but it's, again, ridge and furrow at the specific medieval technique, but the word ridge and furrow can then be used for farming, say, in the Iron Age or the Bronze Age as well. It's ridge and a furrow. That's basically what it is. So the Iron Age, is something that you don't have wheeled ploughing, but you do necessarily have a little bit of there is a little bit of an open field system, but usually in the Iron Age, big difference usually with the Iron Age is that the plots are so small, right, that they might put walls around them to sort of enclose them. This is the Iron Age rather than the medieval period. So again, raised ridges, and this really continued until the 1800s. But again, when we look, and we'll explain a little bit more about this next week. When you look in, usually when you're looking for earlier prehistoric ridge and furrows, right, they're much slighter, and then the medieval ones can be a meter high. If we give you an example of a proper ridge and furrow landscape, so if we go to hang on a minute, if we go, hang on a minute. If we go to Warham and Percy, this is what the difference between an Iron Age landscape. So you've got Warham, Percy, Warham, Percy. Hopefully, I can spell it like a site which was excavated extensively in the 1960s. One of the most excavated medieval landscapes in Britain, Warham, Percy. Now, hopefully, we can look at a Warham. There we go. There's a ridge and furrow, Warham Percy landscape. Oh, that's the best one. There. That is Warham Percy, and the ridge and furrows within that landscape are quite distinctive for Warham Percy. So if we type in medieval ridge and furrow, it'll give you a bit of an idea. Ridge. The goat's waiting for me to put her to bed. There, look at these ridge and furrow landscapes in the medieval period. This is what they look like today. Look at that there. That's a medieval ridge and furrow landscape, not Iron Age. And because the ridges were a meter high, right, and they've remained like this for the past 600 years, that's a typical medieval ridge and furrow landscape. So that is the difference, again, between the medieval ones that we're going to actually look at next week. So again, thinking about sort of this is a mixture of landscapes. There's a bit of medieval there, a bit of Iron Age, all sorts of stuff. Upland, abandoned area. Give you a little bit more information about this. So obviously, the reason why the ridge and furrows are very deep because they're using heavy oxen. And there is a wheeled plough being introduced in the medieval period as well. So you can get these really tall ridges. In summary, while it is true that the traces of early agricultural techniques exist, usually in upland areas, ridge and furrow as a defined agricultural term, Middle Ages, medieval, not Iron Age, but we do see ploughing from the medieval period, a ridge and furrow landscape in the Iron Age, but they're much slighter than their medieval counterparts. Now, one thing I managed to get from one thing that we got a bit confused with last week, when we were looking at these, right? We're going to going back have a little more look at these just quickly again. We wanted a bit of definition, didn't we? So these are the sword shaped, and these are the iron currency bars. And we mentioned that these are found extensive, loads of these are found extensive. And I've got a little source. So these are the ones that are sword shaped. Last week, we mentioned that there were 3 other sites of Iron Age currency bars, right? They were spit shaped. I've got an example of one of them. I've got an example of a plough shaped one, which was really difficult, but from more of a Scandinavian context, and I think I've got the bay leaf shaped ones, but the sword shaped ones, if you can remember, this represents 40% of all the bar ones in Britain. And thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you. So I've got some text that I want us to look up on the screen. Before we do that, we've got this. They also mentioned in another context, Iron Age, copper and iron ring money. But if you remember last week, we were specific with the fact that Iron Age iron currency is actually made of iron rather than bronze. The bronze rings. We're very specific. So Iron Age currency bars are iron, not bronze rings, right? So we've got this. I found this online, which was absolutely fascinating. So instead of me reading this out with an image, I'm going to read this out so you can read it. So this study of iron currency bars began as a note. So nobody was really interested in currency bars. They were finding loads of them, right? And there was this guy, Professor Sir Ian Richmond, writing of the excavations of the British Museum at Hod Hill. And they basically said, hang on a minute, boys, there is such thing as these mean something. There's loads of them being found. Are they some kind of currency like coins? And the other thing as well is, right, why are they currency bars, right? Why are they currency? Well, I could say the same with coins. Why are coins currency? It's the same thing. It was intended to accompany a similar account of Celtic coins from Hod Hill, for which he had previously asked. Hod Hill is the only site where coins and bars have been found in comparable numbers. They found was it 27 of these at Hod Hill and lots of coins. They've found these again these currency bars that look like swords. Now that's one category, right? However, as one thing led to another, the original note grew out of scale for a contribution. So they did a whole paper on the currency bars. So the term Iron Age iron currency bars has long been in use to describe certain elongated iron objects found in late Iron Age sites in Britain. So 100, remember, iron currency bars go back to 200 years BC. So the earliest records are a hoard found at Meon Hill, Warwickshire. Now we mentioned Meon Hill in Warwickshire. They found hundreds of them there, right? In 1824, and most of them probably ended up down a scrappy. These iron stored bars from Meon Hill, Warwickshire, became well known after the discovery, and we've got an image of the Samlesbury ones from Gloucester coming up as well. So the first serious study. So they've been studying these currency bars since properly 1864, right? So so here we go. Oh, right, this is where it gets really, really interesting, right? So it's considered, there's lots of theories about these and what the currency bars are for. This is really interesting. Between 1,100 and 1,500 iron currency bars relevant to this study have been found at more than 20 sites in Britain, but they're mainly in the south. But they're not all looking like swords. That's the whole point. Some are looking, some look like spit-shaped, plough-shaped, and bay leaf-shaped currency bars, right? So whether they are all iron currency bars depends on the definition of currency bar adopted or currency. The first task was to trace as many bars as possible. And the author said they found examples of more than 30 collections of these bars. And then it goes on to say, right, well, we've done that now. Oh, here we go. So they're looking to do lots of research and analysing them. So these are the ones. Hang on, is that home chase? Hang on a minute. What we've got there? Hang on a minute. That's are those the Samlesbury ones? Yeah, those are the Samlesbury ones which you just mentioned. So we got those ones. So put them on quickly. On display in the Cheltenham Art Gallery and Museum. And then we go to here. These are another ones from Home Chase. These are more of those currency bars that look like swords. Right, and you can see how they're flanged over. We had this discussion last week. Really difficult to understand why they're flanged over, but they are, and maybe they could be held in something. Now, then I went on the journey. I just thought, right, I can't find any images of the spit-shaped ones and the plough-shaped ones and the bay leaf-shaped ones. Eventually, I did. And then it took me to Scandinavia. So one thing that we don't talk about Scandinavia, did they have coins in Scandinavia? We'll leave that question for one of you to work out in the Iron Age next week. But what we do have is currency bars in the Iron Age in Scandinavia. Now, this is rather interesting from another angle, right? Now, I could easily say that these look like these look like plow shapes, actually. There's a point to be made here. These look like spade-shaped ones, right? Socketed axe and socketed tool ones. But if these are currency, right? If you found one of these in the field, you'd think they were an axe. If you found that in the field, you'd think they're an axe. But that's currency, and that's currency. There's a point to be made here. What if most swords found in the Iron Age were actually currency and not meant to be used in battle? Do you get my point? Maybe lots of axes that we find are actually not used to cut down trees at all. They're actually used as currency, because these can't cut down trees apparently in Scandinavia. They're definitely axes, right? Or they're socketed, because that one's socketed, except it's not to be used as an axe, right? It's meant to replicate something. So that replicates the sword, but it's used as currency. That replicates an axe, but it's used as currency. And then you can think, hang on a minute, there is something about this. Maybe that's to trade for a sword, or maybe that's to trade to melt down for a sword. Maybe that you're melting that down to make an axe. I don't know. Anyway, this is something else as well, which is coming from, these are all Scandinavian ones. And then what we do have is that what you can say is the relationship of Norwegian axes and currency bars of type, and they're basically saying, so what they're saying is these are more likely to be currency bars rather than axes. But if you find something like this in a field in Britain, you immediately say it's an axe. And maybe the one on the left, maybe the one on the right there is classified as one of the spit-shaped ones that you typically found in the Cotswolds and Somerset, right? And maybe some of these you could think that they might look like plough-shaped ones. So basically what they're saying is all these little black things are where they're finding the currency bars in Scandinavia. However, and I'm reminded that Finland is not Scandinavia. So that little dot there, Finland, is that Finland? Yeah, that's Finland. But anyway, the point is you can see a collection of where you find these currency bars, but they're not found everywhere. And look, that there's none in Denmark. Interesting. So we got when I was going through this, I thought, what does a bay leaf look like? That's a bay leaf, right? So I thought these ones here are the bay leafed ones. So these are, I worked out that these are the bay leaf shaped ones, which are the ones found predominantly in Cambridgeshire, which is in Peterborough, which would have used iron from Kent, right? And then I come to the conclusion that these ones here, which I think we did last week, those are the spit-shaped ones rather than swords. So these are spit-shaped ones from the Cotswolds, Somerset. So basically what you've got your spit-shaped ones there, which Cotswolds, Somerset. You've got your bay leaf-shaped ones from Cambridgeshire, and you've got these ones here that basically look like ploughs and stuff, but these are from Scandinavia. I like these that are typically found in Kent and the Thames Valley in the Midlands. Weird, that centre of Britain. And then what we then finally have is we've got our typical sword-shaped ones, and that is your currency bars in the Iron Age. Now, I didn't do much. I didn't mention much about these things because I'm really struggling trying to fit these into currency, because they're all different. They all look different, and they're not iron, they're bronze. But then again, that conflicts with if we type in one last image to look at today. If we go back online, if we type in, I want to make a point here. So Iron Age we use a word that I don't like using a lot, really, because it's overused. Slave. Oh, shackles. I've been in manacles for the past 50 years. Right, so there we go. There. Oh, and these are actually from Wales. Actually, do you want me to do that next, a little bit about that next week? We've got a lake known as Llyn Cerrig Bach that we've actually found these in right now. Actually, I'm gonna write this down. I'm gonna write this down a minute. It's all gone dark. It's all gone dark. So what I might do, I might show you a little bit about this next week as well, which is Llyn Cerrig Bach on Anglesey, which is found in a lake. Now, I made a point last week. I basically said, hang on, let's do my point, right? Are we interpreting that as currency? Or like most archaeologists, they would interpret that as slave shackles. Now that's the point. Are these for slaves, or maybe are these currency? Because basically everything else seems to be currency. So why can't these be? Good point. We'll mention this next week and we'll show you more about this site, Llyn Bach. So we're going to call that a day now. Find out if there's any questions. I got to it's getting dark, so I got to put a light on in here. So let's see if anyone's got any questions.
Yeah.
Right, who's next? Look at that. Oh, don't I look good? Look at that there. Oh God, I look really good. Right. Right, okay then. Judith thinks I look great. All I get off Judith these days on my videos online are snide remarks. I know. I see. I love getting a reaction off her. It's just like no. Right. Okay then, Andy. Anything you want to say, darling?
No. I'm quite interested in the field systems. Would kind of explore that a bit more sometime, but
Oh no, we're going to do that next week. That
splendid. Good. Just
we are.
introducing it. Right.
The reason why I didn't want to do it this week is because I felt I would be letting you down by not having the beautiful aerial photographs of Iron Age field systems from Wales that I've got to show you next week from a book. So I want to get those images right.
All right, lovely. Look forward to that. Thank you.
Good. So do I. Right. Okay then. Who are we going to do next? Should we have Judith?
Yeah, I'm struggling to get my head around this currency thing. Are we sure it's currency? Could there be weights and measures?
The thing is, I didn't actually say that I completely agreed that they were currency. I said that this is why I did the shackles and whatever. It's like, to be honest with you, as I said, currency only works if everybody's got it. And as we only find this at a certain number of Iron Age sites across a fifth of Britain, right, they can hardly be cast as currency. And also the same thing comes as coins. If you're not finding coins on a site outside Wrexham, or you're not finding Iron Age coins in a site in Cumbria, and if you're not finding Iron Age coins in a site outside York, but you're finding Iron Age coins down the road, right? How is it currency if not everybody's got access to it? It's not currency if and this is the point. Is it currency? If it's weights and measures, why isn't it everyone hasn't got the same thing?
I don't know.
Does that not depend on how you define what currency is? If it's an object that can be exchanged for something else, that if you define that as currency, then it would be. But I like you think currency, the modern currency is everybody's got it and recognizes it. But I don't know.
Are we taking it for granted that currency is what we've got today? It's not everyone's got currency. Then again, you could, for example, I've told you guys this before. When I was really short of money, right? I used to go. I remember going as the hairdresser one day. I said, "Oh, can you cut my hair for a book?" And he said, "Yeah." And about 2 years later, I said, "Look, I've got an acting shoot next week." Oh yeah, I'll have the next book. So I gave him another book. So instead of me paying 10 quid for a haircut, he gets a free book. So that's currency, isn't it?
No, it's trade.
It's trade.
Ah, now we're getting another word. It's trade.
Used for
Exactly.
trade, gifts or offerings.
So should we be calling it
for trading?
Trade bars?
Yes.
And in fact, hang on a minute, 1 second. So the coins are trade coins. They're not exactly currency.
Exactly.
Another thing I
Did you work
wonder,
it out, Margaret?
when there's debt, sometimes they give a marker. You know, just something
That's
that
what I said last week.
until they can pay something.
Walter.
You know,
Oh, right. So obviously, yeah, people do this, don't they? You go into a museum some days and they give you a really expensive piece of equipment to listen to, and they say you got to leave us with your iPhone.
Yeah.
Like you go around the museum using this device. Yeah. Now that's trade, isn't it? That's not currency.
No.
No.
You're trading something to get.
But it's a guarantee.
Yeah.
It's a sort of
Hang on a minute. Hang on a minute.
Back.
Isn't the iron bar a guarantee then? That we're going to give you X amount of iron bars in exchange for 10 sacks of grain?
If it's a promise, you could say it's that. But if you're actually doing it, it does become a currency, doesn't it?
I thought we got rid of the word currency. It's not currency.
No, it's not currency. It's not money as we know it these days.
No,
it's not. It's not.
I just looked up the definition of currency as we know it today, and it says currency is a standardization of money in any form, in use or circulation as a medium of exchange.
Yeah.
Well, could it be that the big long ones are like 100 and the smaller bay leaf ones are 50 and the little ones are 20?
But there is a problem. You don't usually see them together. It's only certain people using the swords, and there's only the other people using them in Somerset. They're not using swords. They're using swords in Hampshire, right? So
well, that's posh. You see, they can afford the hundreds.
Oh, the north-south divide.
Yeah, that divide's been there a long time. Yeah.
They use the big ones to bash people over the head and say,
no, you're getting ridiculous. On that note, anything else you want to say, Margaret?
No. When did they talking about field patterns? We're doing that next week, are we?
Yeah, the thing is, I wanted to do it this week, and I thought Peat was a bit more than, and I thought right, so we might do. Unfortunately, the bit about the airport took up a bit of time, so I wanted to chuck into that. No more archaeology next week because no more new finds next week. But yeah, so we're doing field patterns.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
So best to do aerial views and better comparison, over the ages. Right, okay then. You've done, Margaret. We're going to ask David because anything you want to say, David?
No, thank you very much. Good night, all.
Bye, David.
Bye, David.
Keep doing well. Enjoy the sun. Night, David.
Good night, David.
Night. Right, who's next? We're not really doing well tonight. We're getting through everybody. Judith.
Yeah.
You've done me.
Oh, right. Well, there's two of you then, isn't there? Because I didn't call her Fraggle this week, she's not talking to me. Talking. David, anything you want to say?
David Richard.
Oh, no, Richard.
David Richard. You could call me David. My wife always say David.
Don't get on with it. Anything.
Go on. You want to say anything?
Yeah, I do. I did. I'm really tired today. I've been to the doctor this morning, and I don't know what's wrong. But all very interesting. Loved it. I've got a brother called Peat in Taunton. He'd love to hear all about Peat.
We'll get Peat on. Peat on. Anyway, thanks for that. Anything you want to say, Emma?
It's been nice.
Yeah, no, not for me, thanks. I'm all right.
Emma, just because I'm not sending you all the videos all the time and all my love, it don't mean to say we don't love you.
Yeah.
You're in our heart, Emma. Right. Anything you want to say, Anne?
Big silence.
Anne.
Yeah, I was just something I really didn't like history at school. Never, I hated it. And yet, I think what you bring is like today and last week, you bring the life of ordinary people. You know, people who are going to work the peat or people who are in the mine kiln. These are the things. One could imagine oneself being like this rather than history at school seems to be like kings and queens and battles, which I was never interested in. But I do find, this is the kind of history I always wanted, technological history and, how things developed. And I think I'm really enjoying it. So I do thank you for running it.
Good. My pleasure. And also, I think on that point, thank you for that, Anne. On that point, when we were in school, we actually had the other side of it. We actually had kings and queens, and everything was about politics. And I just thought there was nothing in the middle. It was like the Corn Law reform and the Rebecca riots, even though it was really interesting. We didn't actually do the real people.
Yeah, it was always about stories rather than evidence.
Yeah.
That's the difference, I think.
The Chartist petition, 2 million signatures, but it didn't actually work out who Joe Bloggs was on that petition. Yeah. We didn't actually know who these people were at the bottom and what they were doing.
Yeah, you never knew anything at the bottom of society at all. Usually it was all, they hardly mentioned unless they were rioting or something.
Oh yeah, the pizza. Yeah, what we'll do, we'll have the Peterloo massacres and we'll kill a load of people, right? That's fine, but we don't get to know about how that affected their families. Yeah. Right. Okay, Drina, and then we'll do Andy to finish.
What sort of size were these currency bars and weight? Were they heavy?
Oh no, we did the bars. They were saying that I don't think this is right actually, because they were saying last week that the iron sword-like currency bars are only like half a kilogram in weight, and that just doesn't make sense. They've got to be heavier than that.
Yeah.
Surely to God.
Yeah. No, it didn't seem to be any indication of size.
No, because on here it clearly says the bars generally weigh between half a kilogram and 0.3 kilogram. That don't make sense.
Well, they've got to be portable, haven't they?
Yeah, that's
but that's actually quite small. That's actually, the weight isn't very much there.
No, that's just one pound, isn't it?
Yeah. In English.
Yeah, in English, exactly. I'm actually going to try and answer that question before we finish. Andy, you've got to say a few things.
You've already asked me.
I'll go and say something else.
Oh, I don't understand that. How do they know they're not axes? Those axe-shaped ones.
They can't do, can they?
Not the flat ones, but the ones that had the holes through the middle as well.
Well, any of them, I think. Yeah. You wouldn't immediately spring to mind, would it?
I do struggle with them as saying the currency.
Yeah, I think it's because they can't think what else it can be.
One of them looked like a needle, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Those were the spit-like ones, right? So the iron, it says here, and this is AI now, AI, not Wikipedia, AI. AI's taken over.
Well, they make it
Iron age currency bars typically ranged in length between 78 centimeters and 85 centimeters. So
that's quite
just
big.
under half a meter. However, they had a width of 3.5 millimeters. So these are really thin things, and they weighed a maximum of 700 grams.
That's really weird.
Yeah. But they've also found these in Scandinavia.
Yeah. They have.
Were we trading with Scandinavia? I mean, we probably were, weren't we? We were seagoing people.
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah.
Arr.
Arr. I know. Do you know the accent that they used to use back then out at sea? It was arr.
Arr. Everybody
Did
understands.
you
Arr.
did you know that Jefferson Davis sounded like somebody from Somerset? Apparently, this is the latest thing. You can imagine. Are you now the president of the United States of America? Are you going to do what I say? Are you going to have my whiskey? Arr. Can you imagine them fighting in battle?
Arr.
It's like, come on, lads, here we are. God. Apparently, that's the latest research. And the other thing as well is when I used to do my ghost walks, and Emma was asking when I'm doing my ghost walks next. So when we do ghost walks next, Emma, it'll be one in Lantwick Major. And one of the stories I'll tell you in Lantwick Major is that the accent in Lantwick Major, which I mentioned earlier on, which was close to these burials, in Lantwick Major, the accent used to be a Somerset accent in Lantwick Major because there's so many people from Somerset coming over to Lantwick Major. Can you imagine a Welsh person coming across somebody from in Wales? Where'd you come from? No, it'd be like this. I'm gonna get a nasal accent. Where do you come from? I can't get this. Where do you come from? And I'll be in Welsh, you see. From Somerset, where all the farmers are. It just don't go, does it? You know.
But they'd be speaking Welsh anyway.
What? No, the people from Somerset.
No, well, I don't think they spoke Welsh. You never know. Are you saying that the people of Somerset brought Welsh to Wales?
Hang on a minute.
That was people from here. That was
Cumbria.
Cumbria.
No, shut up about Cumbria. Right, hang on. We got to get this right. The Cornish, somebody from Somerset in Wales speaking Welsh. It'd be going, Borodar. Borodar. An afternoon would be pounder. And then good night would be not star.
Yeah. Sounds like a good night.
Yeah. Oh, flipping out. That wouldn't go down well on a ship, would it?
Isn't it funny though that it's not gone the other way?
I think it's funny. What?
The accent. We get it here. We get along from the northeast along Hadrian's Wall to Carlisle. You get a distinct northeastern sort of what they call it, Geordie sort of twang to it that fizzles out. And then you also get a really weird one on the west coast of Cumbria, which is not like the rest of Cumbria at all because it was a big trading port. But if you're saying that the people from wherever Somerset went to Wales, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Why didn't they go the other way? Why didn't the accent go the other way?
Yeah.
Oh no, it doesn't go.
No. It's odd, isn't it?
It's
it is.
Do you think perhaps Welsh people had more sense? I'm not going there.
I'm not going there.
It's flat there. I'm not going there.
Well, they used to say, if you ran Wales, that would be twice the size of England. What?
Carlisle's what?
Well, they're still very English in Carlisle, but if you just take a step over the border into Welsh and Galloway, it's Scottish all of a sudden.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
Did I ever tell you that story about the Scottish neighbour I had one day? He had these two Scotty dogs, right? They used to bark all the time, right? And his guy was from Scotland, right? So dogs were barking like 2 in the morning. So I rang his bell out on his flat, right? He come grumpy to the door, and I started singing in the corridor. The Lord will get through, says let the wind blow. Hey, he didn't like that at all, and he moved the next week.
Got that somewhere.
Old Welsh trousers.
Yeah.
Or me singing to the neighbour.
My uncle bought it for my dad because he was called Donald. He wasn't impressed.
No.
It's not a great song, but
yeah. Who the something hell is Alice? That's even better.
Don't know that.
You cannot have that playing at a party without using the F word. Who the is Alice?
Never
You can
heard
hear.
of
You can.
that.
I'm not.
Was it Chubby Brown? I can't think.
Chubby
I've
Brown,
heard it.
yeah.
Was it him? Yeah.
Oh, there would be that then, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Who is Alice? You have to look that one up. Right. Anything else anyone wants to say before we finish?
Nope.
No, thank you.
Right. Don't forget, Emma is now taking her dad, Judith, and whoever they can get to Chepstow all the way to the excavation in West Wales.
Jolly good.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll let you know.
Good. On that note, folks, thank you very much for joining us tonight, and see you all next week. And good of you to join us, Margaret, Emma, and Richard, and Anne, Gina, and Judith, and Andy, and everybody else. And hopefully see you all next week.
Yep. Thanks
You
for
will.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Night, folks. Night. Many pleasure. Night. Night.
Bye bye.
Bye. Okay, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And Chernobyl isn't safe anymore. What the hell though? This was live, wasn't it? So I'm just gonna see. Where's this live? Is it still live? Yeah, it's still live. Oh, the dodgy git barter currency. Anyway, nice to have you along, dodgy git. Bog iron FE2 to FE3 reaction. Lovely hair, Margaret. You've had it done. Coal is pre-mushroom. What? The fire never went out. Barter currency. The fuck is that? Don't forget to like and subscribe. And loads of stuff posted tomorrow. Oh my God, right. Okay, don't forget to like and subscribe. Anybody in the chat box on 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Chat box 5, chat box 4, chat box 3, chat box there. Oh my God, look at that thing with the messages there. No, it's the thing that's just come up about the messages in chat. No, I don't need that. Nothing there. Nothing there. And